Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel, the only gun channel here on YouTube dripping with that BDE. That's right, Big Dad Energy. If you've had to lovingly learn how to tell your kids, dude, that's not a trick, I'm not gonna stop making you lunch to watch, then go ahead and hit the like button. I'm David, and today we're looking at three nice 2011 style pistols. It is the Springfield Armory Prodigy in 5-inch, the Masterpiece Arms DS9 Hybrid, or the Aardvark, and the Nighthawk Custom President, which is a 1911 that they've now offered in the wide body format. This is very much a video that's going to be about diminishing returns curve, because like there's tremendous, they call it like utility. So you get maximum utility going from like 0 to 1, which would be going up to like the Prodigy. And then with like each dollar you spend after that, you're getting less for the money. So what all that money is buying you as you kind of move up that curve, we're going to talk about in this video. Now, it's very important to keep in mind that the 2011 style pistols are based off a 1911 style design, which is a design that's over 100 years old and was developed in an era where labor was a heck of a lot cheaper than developing like custom machines or whatever. So putting these things together is pretty labor intensive. Fast forward to now, and the machines that we're using to make these pistols are incredibly precise, and there's significantly less labor involved than there used to be, but they still require a ridiculous amount of expensive material to make. There's a ton of tool steel that goes into this in a world of investment casting and stamping small parts on all the other guns in your holster. So when you wonder why 1911s are so expensive, or 2011s, that's why. There's just a lot of billet and a lot of tooled steel that goes into these guns. Another thing to think about is that specification on kind of how the guns are built matters. Like there's a bunch of different options, and you don't know what you necessarily like on a gun until you've kind of played with other versions of the option. And sort of the emblem of what a 2011 should look like is like this full-length rail with the heavy bull barrel that you see there and the full-length steel guide rod. That's kind of been what a 2011 has been since it got its introduction in the world of competitive shooting. It's very much based off the old STI Edge type guns, and for the most part in people's minds, including the new staccato duty style pistols, they have very much that same specification. But that's not the only way the pistols can be, and to that point, like the Nighthawk is a short railed with a traditional bushing barrel with a standard 1911 profile barrel. But there's a bunch of other stuff you can geek out on, whether you want a flat trigger or a curved trigger, if you want ambi safeties or single-sided safety, if you want a magwell, no magwell, the profile of the grip and the grip texture, how the slide is weighted, like you can really get down in the weeds on this, but we're not going to do that in this video. So that all said, let's meet the contestants. The first is the least costly. It is the Springfield Armory Prodigy. And some of you guys are like, no, the least costly one is the Rock Island. The Rock Island one doesn't have mag commonality with any of the guns we're looking at today. It's a different platform that is very similar, but it's not quite the same. This is the 5-inch version of the Prodigy. This gun has worked great for me. If you have watched a bunch of videos on these, you know some people have had issues with it. I haven't had any issues with it, but for some reason you guys want me to be accountable for everybody else's guns, so there you go. This gun actually is pretty well set up out of the box. Now, this gun has kind of an interesting specification that is very enjoyable, and for a fun, you know, shooting on the range type gun, this gun absolutely gets it done. Moving up to the $3,300 gun is the Masterpiece Arms DS9 Hybrid. Now, this is very much a competition-centric gun. It has the full-length rail-ish. This is the IDPA version that has the short rail to make it a little bit lighter. It has the heavy barrel and the full-length steel guide rod, has an optics plate system, and it has aluminum grips. Super cool gun, and actually a pretty good value for 3,300 bucks. Then moving up into the Nighthawk Custom, as I mentioned, this is about a $5,500 gun as currently configured. It is no magwell on it because it's kind of set up to be more of kind of like a flexible home defense style gun. This isn't necessarily a competition purebred like the other guys. Aluminum grip, same single action trigger, single-sided safety, super cool gun. All three of these guns I've got full-length video reviews on that you can check out if you want to see more information on it. So let's dive in on what the differences are. So starting with the small parts, this is what everyone's going to say. Now, there is a process called metal injection molding, and it's used to make small parts specifically on like guns, and the Springfield Armory has a bunch of metal injection molded parts. Now, I've not pulled the thing apart to take inventory of what all the pieces are, but I'm just going to assume that it's basically all the pieces. So what that means is that the grip safety, the manual safety, probably the hammer and sear and the disconnector are all metal injection molded parts. I recently broke my first metal injection molded part. It was a thumb safety, and it took over 15,000 rounds for the thing to break down. It was a gun that I used in competition and had tons of reps in dry fire. So, I mean, that was an exceptionally hard wearing part. Most people aren't going to shoot a gun like that to the point of failure. So it is something to be aware of. You can't get the trigger set up as nicely as you can with like tool steel parts. If you were to upgrade all of the pieces in this gun that are currently MIM, assuming the list I said before is correct, then it would be about a $400 to $500 spin before the cost of any gunsmithing to get them installed. Both of the other two guns come with 100% tool steel parts that are going to last as long as the gun lasts for the most part. Like, you may eventually round off the hammer hooks and maybe have to replace the sear to maintain positive engagement, but generally speaking, those are going to last a long time. Next is going to be going down into the grip. Now, the Prodigy comes with a polymer grip, and this can be a feature that some people actually like because you can stipple these grips, you can change sort of the balance of them. You don't want the gun to be super heavyweight. Does a 9mm gun need to weigh 40 ounces? It's debatable, and honestly, this is the softest shooting of the bunch with how it's set up, but that has more to do with how the slide is designed, and we'll talk more about that later. But this has a plastic grip, which is about $100, $150 piece-ish, versus the other two, which feature aluminum grips. Now, an aluminum grip module is about a $400 piece if you were to buy it standalone, so you can do the math on what that upgrade would be, and there are people who are starting to introduce upgrades for the Prodigy. The next thing you're gonna get is kind of the attention to detail and the form it takes of the complexity of machining. Now, if you look at the Prodigy slide, it is a traditional 1911 style slide with very minimal fore and aft serrations. This has spent the least amount of time on a machine to get cut than any of the guns otherwise. If you go up to the Masterpiece arms, you've got these more aggressive, and you've got window cuts up at the front. The slide is tri-topped in a way that the Springfield isn't, and it has, you know, an optic cut system. We'll talk more about that in a second. Coming up even further to the President, it just has more complex geometry, more interesting lines, more setup. It has rib serrations. It's got 3 windows on either side and a rib down kind of the top of the gun. So it's just spent probably the most amount of time on a machine getting the slide cut. Talking about the optic system, you would think that the more money you spend, the better optic system you get. And that's honestly true, because I would say that the Nighthawk solution, their interchangeable optic system, probably is the best of the plates that are on display. The Masterpiece arms plate actually doesn't sink the optic all that down low, so you get these very tall co-witness irons. Believe it or not, the optic system offered on the Prodigy is actually really solid and sinks the optic down lower than even the Masterpiece does. It is the Agency Arms optic system, the AOS system. This is a really good optic cut. The only problem is that we're like 3 months after the release of this gun, and you can't get any more of these plates, so you're pretty much locked in on this doctor style footprint. In the attention to detail sort of game, there is then kind of the finishes. So the finishes used on this gun is just a Cerakote. The Prodigy uses Cerakote, which is a okay weapons finish, but it definitely wears off. It's starting to wear off with just a little bit of holster time this gun has seen at the high points on the frame and the slide. Cerakote's okay, but it's not great. Moving up to the Masterpiece arms, you've got a stainless steel barrel and a DLC frame and slide with an anodized grip, and the small parts are coated with a DLC type finish as well, which is nice because the high touch points on the controls will wear off a Cerakote finish. In fact, the manual safety and the magazine release are both losing their finish on the Springfield gun with the limited amount of shooting I've done with the thing. And stepping up from there, you've got the same DLC on all of the Nighthawk pieces. Everything is DLC coated except for the barrel, which is titanium nitrided, giving it kind of that nice understated like gold look, which is pretty cool. Then obviously there's going to be fit. Now, the Prodigy, to its credit, was designed to be mass produced, and there's more of these in circulation than either of the other two guns. So the actual slide to frame fit is decent, but it's not as good as the other two, as evidenced by putting the hammer back and rocking the slide. It has the most play between the slide and the frame. That said, I'm not even going to compare accuracy between these guns because they're all more accurate than I am, to the Springfield Armory's credit. So that added sort of play with sort of minimal fitting, the parts are slightly undersized so that gunsmiths don't have to spend a bunch of time getting the things fit. And that factors in with the MIM pieces. The MIM pieces are going to be generally close enough that don't require a whole bunch of fitting to make operational. Moving on to the Masterpiece arms, this actually gets you to a level of fit that previously would have cost you $5,000 or $6,000, but like it's ridiculously solid. There's almost no play in the frame and slide, and this gun has the most rounds of it of any of the guns we're talking about. This is 2,000 to 3,000 rounds on this gun at this point, and it's still super duper tight. There's a slight amount of wiggle. Let's see if you can hear it. Very slight amount of wiggle in this gun, but it's enough to where I didn't have to shoot it in. It came broken in out of the box and just worked from day one. And moving up to the Nighthawk is tighter fit. There is a small amount of wiggle that you can feel with this, but it's just this side of needing to be shot in. Again, this gun was reliable out of the box as well. Carrying that same MO forward, going back to sort of the MIM parts, the controls and the positivity and how just the quality feel of the parts aren't going to be quite as good. Because I've got two of these Prodigies, I know that the thumb safeties can be a little bit wiggly. They're not on this model, but they are on my other model. The mag button just kind of has a gritty sort of feel to it. Listen. The trigger, you'd be expecting me to say to you, is way worse than the other two, but it's honestly not. It's got my favorite trigger profile, which is a medium curved trigger profile with a serrated face. It is super manageable at about 4.5 pounds. It is a very nice trigger. Jumping on to the Masterpiece arms, all of a sudden everything tightens up a little bit. The mag release button is basically silent. The manual safety has a super positive click in either side. Trigger is a medium flat trigger though with a smooth face, and it's got a slight amount of play, but this came with a 2-pound trigger as observable here. And just everything in the gun, it feels like a more quality gun than the Prodigy. Moving up to the Nighthawk, and it kind of carries that slightly more. And similar to the slide and frame fit, it's slightly tighter fit, the quality and the controls, but specifically like the mag buttons where it's most observable, like it's the smoothest depressing mag button. The manual safety works the same as the Masterpiece one, no difference there. And the trigger quality is set up on this gun out of the box at 3.5 pounds, but the throw, the over travel, everything, it's providing enough feedback to where a general interest guy isn't going to torch rounds off. It's just a more general purpose type trigger and not a competition specific trigger. So the Nighthawk sort of sits atop the pile as being slightly in front of the Masterpiece arms, but it's not a tremendous difference. Now the next thing is going to be how the pistols come out of the box. Now the Prodigy is going to come in a super basic bag, a pistol rug if you will, with 2 magazines from Duramag, and it's, you know, it's nice to have, but it's not particularly nice. Moving up to the Masterpiece arms, this particular model of the DS9 comes with 3 MBX mags, and MBX is making some of the best magazines in the double stack 1911-2011 game, and it comes with a good pistol rug that accommodates the mags and the gun itself. And when you step up to the Nighthawk, it comes in a super premium range bag with 2 17-round staccato magazines. The experience of opening the Nighthawk is exactly what you would imagine. It is significantly higher end than either of the other two, just based on the bag alone. So it's kind of like opening up a new Apple product, and don't hear me say that because some of you guys hate Apple and say they're not very good, but like the experience of opening an Apple product is very, very streamlined, straightforward. You feel like you've gotten something special, and I would say that the Nighthawk definitely hits on that in a way that the other two do not. And finally, one of the other things that makes the guns cost a different amount is like the Springfield Armory Prodigy. It comes in 2 different models, and the 2 models are basically interchangeable from like here down. So all of the parts that work in the 4.25 inch model will work in the 5-inch model, except for the frame, slide, and barrel. So Springfield Armory is able to defray the costs of the engineering that goes into making the guns across more guns and only across 2 SKUs, where if you jump up to the Masterpiece arms, and I'm gonna make up numbers because I don't know what the Springfield numbers are, but I have a pretty good feel for where these guys are. So let's assume that they're doing like 500 guns a month or whatever in the Prodigy setup. You can imagine when you're doing a forecast of how much money you need to allocate to each gun for like R&D, it's going to be a much lower rate when you're doing 500 guns versus either one of these is probably like 100 guns. And the Masterpiece arms is only doing like 3 or 4 different models, and the parts are, if you look at it, they're purpose built and machined to almost like a price point, a higher price point, keep in mind, but still they're not going crazy with like what they're doing. It is like the barest essence of like this is highly functional and is very well made. Assuming that you're paying your engineers the same cost, the setup cost on this is going to be higher and it's going to be defrayed over fewer units. So let's say there's 100 of these a month. That might be a little bit generous, but somewhere in that ballpark. And similarly, the Nighthawk, like if you look on the Nighthawk website, they've got a bunch of different models. So each one of these models has, you know, different slide profiles, different frames, their double stack grip. There's a bunch of stuff that's going into somebody designing that, testing it, failing, redesigning it, and ultimately arriving at the finished product. So the cost of that guy's time is defrayed over a bunch of smaller batch. So it's going to increase the part per cost, and all the Nighthawk stuff, and same with the Masterpiece arm stuff, is built to really ridiculous levels of quality and their standards are very high, so it just makes the guns sort of more expensive. Versus, you know, this being a true price point gun, the quality is still good on this pistol, you know, and there's so few options that it's just driving the cost per piece down. The shooting experience of the guns, you would think that the higher end guns are the nicest, but honestly, the Springfield Armory Prodigy is the softest shooting. It takes 115 range loads and it kind of dumbs it down because of the polymer grip that squishes in recoil a little bit and the heavy slide. The brass just dribbles out of this gun, which when you're doing target shooting isn't a big deal, but the second you start driving the gun to transition toward where the brass is coming out, you can start to introduce the potential for malfunction. So I'd like it if this gun threw brass with a little bit more authority, but as it is right now, it's a super mega fun gun to shoot. Either one of these two guns throw brass with more authority, but they also have a little bit more muzzle rise in return as a result of it. But with the aluminum grips, they hit a little bit harder because the recoil is a little bit more linear. I don't feel like I'm leaving anything on the table with what the difference is and how all three of these guns shoot. When I was shooting at speed, they all performed fine. So that's really kind of it, guys. Really, it's going to come down to what your spec is and what you want the guns to do and how you need them set up. Let me know what your thoughts and experiences are in the 2011 game in the comments below. I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys.